Japanese culture is perhaps one of the most highly intricate and hierarchical cultures on the planet. I'm told that when you meet someone, before you're even able to address them, you need to know where they fit in on the social ladder relative to your own social ranking, so that you can address them with the appropriate respect and decorum. Now, I think that this Japanese culture represents only the most extreme of an all too human phenomenon present in all cultures, that of wanting to pigeonhole people. That was present even in Jesus' day 2,000 years ago in ancient Palestine. In a town like Nazareth, a backwater town, everybody would have been pretty much on the same social level, pretty much mediocre. There would have been the landowners and the village rabbi, and then the landless peasants, but everybody would have known their social status, which was pretty low down. What would have been valued in such a culture without DSTV or Netflix would have been the ability of a person to eloquently capture the attention of people, entertain them, but also inspire them. We're not even sure that the village rabbi in Nazareth would have had this ability to attract crowds by his compelling charisma. And so probably the hottest thing in town in Nazareth would have been someone from out of town, itinerant preachers, would-be messiahs, and miracle workers who would pass by, and if nothing else, provide a few days entertainment for the people of Nazareth. But mostly, they existed convinced of their own ordinariness, of the mundane value of their existence and their own social standing. And this did not bother them so long as everybody else around them was equally mundane, ordinary, and mediocre. But along comes Jesus and shatters this contentment of their own mediocrity, because they hear about Jesus. They know him, of course, but they hear about him starting his ministry not in Nazareth but in a neighboring town, in Capernaum. And they hear that he has become the hottest thing in town, that he is attracting huge crowds from the Decapolis and even beyond. And when he arrives in Nazareth, they want to know, where does he get all this from? Because the thing about someone from your own entourage, someone that you grew up with, becoming famous, someone excelling, is that the next question you ask yourself is, well, what about me? How have I failed? Why haven't I climbed to the same heights? If I've had the same upbringing, if I've been grown up in the same backwater town, if I've had no formal education, just like him, how is it that he has advanced to such a high degree of eloquence, wisdom, graciousness, power to work miracles? Where is all this coming from? And because they cannot accept that God would be able to favor someone exactly like them in such a way, they reject Jesus. They can't accept him. They think that it's all a scam. And so perhaps we might hear Jesus saying to them, okay, fine, if you're not going to believe in me, then I'm not going to work any miracles here. And we can hear him pronouncing a similar condemnation on Nazareth as he did on the towns of Chorazin and Bethsaida. But I don't think it happened at all like that. In fact, I think it happened exactly in the opposite way. I think Jesus desperately wanted to work a miracle for them. Not to vindicate himself, not to restore his own battered and bruised ego. Far from it. He wanted to work a miracle for them so that they might believe in him, so that he might usher them into God's grace that he knew God wanted to share with them through himself. But the tragedy is that their lack of faith, their cynicism, paralyzed Jesus himself. He found himself unable to work the miracles that he so desperately wanted to work. I think this story has so many valuable lessons for us. The first lesson it might teach us is not to pigeonhole people. I think that we do this all so easily here in Zimbabwe. A simple example is when you meet someone for the first time, you're asked, what school did you go to? And through the answer to this question, your interlocutor will be tacitly calculating based on whether you went to a private school, a mission school, a government A school or a government B school, they will have summed you up and pigeonholed you based on that answer and know what to expect from you and think that they know where your life is headed. This was the mistake made by Jesus' kith and kin, by his townsfolk. They pigeonholed him, expected nothing more than their own mediocre lives, and therefore missed the chance to receive God's grace. You see, I think the second lesson we have to learn from this is that God's grace is given to individuals for communities. And the for communities part is important because it shows us that we shouldn't get ourselves wrapped up in knots, tied up in jealousy, fretting about who exactly gets God's grace. What's important is that one person in the community gets God's grace to be shared with everyone else. You see, if we allow ourselves to wind ourselves up in knots about who exactly gets God's favor and God's grace, we will miss it. What's important to know is that God gives the grace to a community through an individual, Jesus in this case, and through the life of Jesus invites everybody else into this fullness. But if we don't realize that God favors some people more than others, then we will live unhappy lives of jealousy, and we will miss God visiting us. Because for God's grace, in order to flow into a community, two things need to happen. The individual who's been gifted by God needs to be willing to share that giftedness. But the people of that community also have to enable the release of that grace through their faith and affirmation of that individual. Jesus' brothers, kith and kin, could not do this, and so they missed the chance to benefit from Jesus' miracles and Jesus' wisdom. Let's pray that in our lives we don't let God's grace pass us by as we seek to affirm the grace and giftedness of those around us and to give of ourselves to all that we meet. God bless and have a good Sunday.